Greetings, and welcome to this brief introduction to Plato's dialogue, the Gorgias. Why read this book today, a book that was written almost 25 centuries ago? The subtitle of the Gorgias is on rhetoric. Today, rhetoric is not exactly a dirty word, but it is viewed with suspicion. People see rhetoric as a way to trick others, particularly in a political context. Politicians frequently criticize each other's positions as empty rhetoric. And yet, for those of us who live in a democracy, rhetoric is deeply important. Rhetoric is the art of persuasion. If we are not going to rule each other with fists or bullets, then we need to use words. We need to persuade each other and be persuaded. That is the job of rhetoric. The question then is there a rhetoric that can help us live together better or more justly? This question hangs over Plato's dialogue as well, all those centuries ago. It makes returning to the Gorgias a deeply relevant task. To make that return and to begin to understand this dialogue, I'd recommend that you pay attention to 3 points. They're easy to miss, but noticing them makes all the difference in making some sense of the Gorgias. First, notice how strange it is that the dialogue is called Gorgias. Gorgias was the most famous speaker in Greece of that time, in the 5th century BC. He was the preeminent teacher of rhetoric. But Socrates speaks with him in this dialogue only briefly. In addition, when the dialogue begins, Gorgias has just finished giving his own fancy speech. We don't get any experience of Gorgias' own rhetoric. Further, because Socrates speaks with him so briefly, we get little sense of Gorgias' own view of rhetoric. By giving us so little of Gorgias in the Gorgias, Plato accomplishes something else. He puts the focus on Socrates' rhetoric. Socrates shows his rhetoric at work in his conversation with Gorgias, then Gorgias' student Polus, and third with a young, aspiring Athenian politician named Callicles. Socrates also talks about his views of rhetoric. We would not focus so intently on Socrates' rhetoric if Gorgias' own dazzling display were revealed. This observation leads to the second point. Notice how puzzling Socrates' words about rhetoric are. Towards the beginning of the dialogue, in his conversation with Polus, Socrates offers a sharply critical view of rhetoric. He calls it a form of flattery. He says it pursues pleasure rather than the good. He treats it as a base imitation of a real art. But as the dialogue progresses, Socrates rehabilitates rhetoric, as the scholar Leo Strauss observed. Socrates shows that arts such as cooking, poetry, or music can pursue both the pleasant and the good. He goes so far as to describe a form of rhetoric, political rhetoric, which would achieve the goal of making citizens' souls better. He even says that he, almost all alone of the Athenians, practices the true art of politics. Socrates captures beautifully the suspicions that many people to this day feel about rhetoric, but he does not leave it there. He also shows the promise of what rhetoric could be in the right hands. This promise leads to my third point. Socrates' rhetoric fails to live up to his promising words, at least here in the Gorgias. In his dialogue with Gorgias and then Polus, Socrates uses his rhetoric to force them to realize the implications of their positions. As a result, they feel ashamed and give in to Socrates. Shame is an effective rhetorical technique, but it's hardly reasoned discourse. In the third part of the dialogue, his conversation with Callicles, which occupies more than half the entire work, Socrates forces Callicles into a stubborn silence. Again, silencing an opponent can be rhetorically effective, but it is hardly a victory of reason. Socrates' stalemate with Callicles is all the more disappointing since Callicles begins the conversation expressing his friendship to Socrates and also some appreciation of the worth of philosophy. If Socrates' rhetoric cannot persuade a young, thoughtful man such as Callicles, what hope would it have with the multitude? But if it's politically ineffective, then what good is it? These 3 points lead us to some provisional conclusions about the Gorgias. Part of what Plato appears to be up to in this dialogue is displaying for us, the readers, different types of souls and their hierarchy. I can't explain this point fully in a brief introduction, so I will just sketch out the thought. First, as clever as they are as speakers, Gorgias and Polus reveal themselves in their conversations with Socrates as conventional. They fall prey to their own shame in the face of customary norms or rules. Callicles, however, is somewhat different. He starts by making a distinction between the conventional or law on the one hand and nature on the other. By appealing to nature, he opens up greater possibilities for the dialogue. His openness to nature connects with another characteristic of his. He and Socrates share something in common: love. Each of them loves a young man. In addition, Socrates loves philosophy, and Callicles loves the Athenian people. This difference in love makes all the difference in terms of their way of life. However, their similarity as lovers marks their superiority to Gorgias and Polus, who, as clever as they are, don't seem particularly serious. By the amount of attention that Socrates gives to Callicles in comparison to Gorgias or Polus, Plato seems to suggest that, as confused as he may be, this politically serious young man deserves greater respect even than the most clever speakers of the time. He deserves this respect not just because he's more serious about politics. He deserves it because even in a confused way, he is looking to nature to figure out how to live best. However, just as the clever men fall short of the politically serious man, so the politically serious man appears to fall short of the philosopher, Socrates. In what way? If we pay attention to Callicles, we can see that even though what he says vacillates in response to Socrates' interrogation, he does stand firm on one point. He is a real man, and real men do not back down from their beliefs. He is attached to a sort of manliness or courage. Socrates, in contrast, remarks that he never vacillates in his words. He's always saying the same things about the same things. However, he also admits that he is always seeking refutation, both for others and for himself. Indeed, he says that he enjoys being refuted even more than refuting others, because he benefits directly from being refuted and shown where his thinking has gone wrong. Callicles' manliness and Socrates' taste for refutation connect with their differing loves. Even though he appeals to nature, in the end Callicles loves the Athenian people, his own people, his nation, or his country. Socrates loves philosophy, which means that he loves the pursuit of wisdom, or that he pursues wisdom lovingly. But that means that he does not possess wisdom. He is not wise, he is ignorant, and most importantly, he knows that he is ignorant. Callicles loves what he has, his city, while Socrates loves what he does not have, philosophy. Plato's artful arrangement of this dialogue suggests that as impressive as Callicles' political seriousness is, it ultimately falls short of true excellence. Paradoxically, that true excellence requires a constant acknowledgement of your own lack of the most important thing, wisdom. Plato thus suggests that the proper order of things would involve rhetoric and politics acknowledging the superiority of and being guided by philosophy. However, he and Socrates also acknowledge Callicles' warning that philosophy will likely find itself arraigned by and executed by the city. Plato's Gorgias does not explore philosophic love as deeply as the Phaedrus or the Symposium do, nor does the Gorgias explore the nature of politics as deeply as does the Republic. Instead, by contrasting Gorgias and Polus, Callicles and Socrates, it teaches us about the limits of both politics and philosophy. We hope you enjoyed this brief introduction to Plato's Gorgias. You can find references to further resources on this page. Please visit again for future broadcasts on other Platonic dialogues. Thank you.